Um, in chapter 1, part 6 of the book, Clarice and Montag were having a conversation, and Clarice asked Montag something, and he laughed, and she quoted, "You laughed when I haven't been funny, and you answer right off. You never stop to think what I've asked you." This says that Clarice is a very thoughtful person. She thinks about things deeper than it actually is. She analyzed the situation and wondered why Montag was laughing when she wasn't telling a joke. My second piece of evidence was found in chapter 2, page 68. Montag was looking at a book and he read, that favorite subject is myself, something like that. And he went back to thinking about Clarice, and he said, but Clarice's favorite subject wasn't herself, it was everyone else and me. She was the first person in a good many years I've really liked. She was the first person I can remember who looked straight at me as if I counted. This shows Clarice's kind-hearted character. She looks at other people like they mean something, and she doesn't look down on people. In part 3, page 138, Montag was walking and he refers back to Clarice, and this shows that Clarice left an influence on Montag, because in various parts of the book he keeps referring back to Clarice, and this is part of it. He walked in the track and he was surprised to learn how certain he suddenly was of a single fact that he could not prove. Once, long ago, Clarice had walked here, where he was walking on. Half an hour later, cold and moving on the tracks, fully aware of his entire body. This part, in chapter 2, Montag always blames different parts of his body as if it's not fully him. He never takes responsibility for it. In this part, Clarice left influence him, and he was thinking for himself, and he was taking responsibility, and he was feeling himself as an entire person rather than separating himself. Now I'll be moving on to world history. I'll be comparing and contrasting two revolutions and saying how they impacted the world today. The first one I'll be talking about is the French Revolution. The French and American Revolution changed the world today in many ways due to the significant events that occurred years ago. The French Revolution started in 1789 and ended in 1799. It was written because the French people were being treated unfairly, and they wanted the absolute monarchy to stop and wanted to have power also. France was being ruled by King Louis XVI. He was a 20-year-old king who was very indecisive and lacked self-confidence. And he married Marie Antoinette when she was 14, and she was known as Madame Deficit due to the fact that she spent a lot of money that she didn't have, and she was hated by the French people because she didn't take very good care of them. Four causes of the French Revolution is weak leadership, which refers back to King Louis. He lacked self-confidence, and he didn't take care of economic problems. He took care of them later, in which they got worse. Economic crisis, which is heavy taxing. The people couldn't afford the taxation, so they threw riots and rebellion. Enlightenment thinkers. The French Revolution was inspired by Enlightenment thinkers such as Jacques Rousseau and Robespierre. And another cause was social inequalities, which is the nobles and the priests didn't have to pay tax, and they were higher than everyone else, while the third estate was lower and they were treated differently. The French, the three French estates, which are the classes. The first one was Catholic priests, and they made up 1% of the population and paid no taxes. And the second was high nobles and dukes, and they also paid no taxes. And the third estate, which was 98% of the population, had to pay taxes to both of them. And this represents social inequality also, which is another reason why they wanted to overthrow King Louis. 5 major events that occurred during the French Revolution is the Estates General, which is a meeting, and it was the first one to be called in 175 years. The National Assembly, which was a group of people that were in the third estate. They were treated unfairly, and they called themselves the National Assembly, and they made their own group so they could talk about the issues that they were having all together because they were locked out of the meeting. And later on, the tennis court oath was held, and it was the first and second estate. The second estate joined them, the third estate, and they swore not to leave the tennis court until they were heard. And the fall of the Bastille, it was the first act of protest and violence, and it's a bunch of pedestrians who marched to the Bastille, which was a prison, and they heard there was weapons in there, so they went in there, got the weapons, and started riots. And the Great Fear was major because it led to the imprisonment of the king and queen, and later on the death of them. I will now be moving on to the American Revolution, which occurred in 1776 and ended 1784. It also occurred because of social inequalities, and what it was meant to do was to make people equal, and the main writer was Madison. Sorry. Causes of the American Revolution. The 3 main causes were stamp taxing, which is on your paper, the tax that you put on there, and then tea taxing, because and intolerable acts, which were the British soldiers living in Americans' houses, and it was mostly influenced by Montesquieu. Similarities between the French Revolution and the American Revolution. They were both fought for because both sides were being treated unequally, and both sides wanted to be treated fairly. And the differences. The American Revolution was a little bit more organized, while the French Revolution kind of led to a bloody fighting and riots at the end. They ended up fighting just because people wanted to follow the king and queen, which was the Jacobins. And a similarity also, they were both influenced by Enlightenment thinkers. They impacted the world today because we can look back at them and compare ourselves to them and know what to do, what might be effective and what might not. And it also impacted us today because we know when we're being treated unfairly and when to speak up, and that violence is not always the answer to things. Thank you for your time. Do you have any questions? This book?
Yeah, you have to open the book up. source search. You hit the wrong button.
Oh.
There we go. Pull this way. No, the other way. There we go. Alright, so walk us through it.
This is my GBQ. My annotations were that these little brackets made it look very glorious, and the eagle is really big, and its wingspan is covering the whole world, which is this active protective. And at the bottom, there's a quote that says 10,000 miles from tip to tip by Philadelphia Press. I assume Philadelphia Press was a publisher or a company. And 10,000 miles from tip to tip, I assume was land, which was power, meaning power. And the question is asking, according to the cartoonist, how did the United States gain its power? In my thesis statement is, according to the cartoonist written by Philadelphia Press, the United States imperialized many states and protected them well. The United States occupied a large amount of state, which is how they got their power. And the United States occupied a large amount of land and protected it. Owning a large amount of land symbolizes power, and the United States owned, quote, and I quoted Philadelphia Press, 10,000 miles from tip to tip, which was written by Philadelphia Press. And at the end, I restate what the question was asking and answered it. The United States occupied a large amount of land from imperialization and protected it well.
Where's your evidence?
Me quoting Philadelphia Press. The quote at the bottom.
Push your paper up a little bit.
Oh,
So
right here.
is the part where you say the United States occupied a large amount of land and had to protect it? That's your second sentence. Is that part of your evidence or your thesis?
Evidence.
Okay. So before you even begin evidence, what should you always do?
Have a thesis statement. Write a thesis statement.
Well, you already have a thesis statement, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So to support your thesis statement, you need a piece of evidence. So what is your evidence? Like in general, what's the source your evidence is coming from?
The picture, the cartoonist.
The cartoon, right?
Yeah.
So how will the reader know exactly what you are citing as evidence, or where you're citing it?
From my annotations.
Now you're gonna, like, imagine I just read your response. I didn't see anything else. So how would you let the reader know what evidence you're using?
From my thesis, because I'd introduce it in the,
So your thesis is fine, because that's your first sentence. You restated it, and you answered the question. So now you have your evidence.
wait, can you ask that again?
Yeah, okay, so we have a thesis check.
Okay.
So we're working on the evidence. So you do have evidence, but it's unclear to where your evidence is. So how can you make it even more clear?
Say, I could cite where I got it from, the evidence from.
So how would you do that?
I could quote Philadelphia Press, or give them credit.
Okay, you did quote that. Wait, is it saying Philadelphia Press? What is that?
Oh, Philadelphia Press.
Okay. So when you're doing evidence, make sure you introduce the source at the
The United States occupied a large amount of land.
And protecting them. Okay, just work on, because in that middle section, it just gets a little messy. So make sure with the formatting that you introduce that quote.
Okay.
Ready? Ready.
I don't want that part on tape, Miss Buckman.